Good morning. It's Lorelei with Radiate Life with Lorelei, and I don't know if you see that energy just coming in today. I actually was wanting to do a short video, and here's my beautiful plants. Here's my sigil with my earth angel, my beautiful, connections. And I want to start by the sigils. I know you can't see them, but I'm going to invite the angels in to open our space and the earth guardians. So the earth guardians, we do their sigil and welcome them into our space for the earth, the water, the air, the fire, for the beautiful animals of the earth, the all the beautiful weather patterns, conditions, the flora, the fauna, the bees, the flowers, the beautiful axis that our earth rotates on, and all the amazing angels that help with spinning the world and helping protect us from solar flares. And I'm going to invite the angels of love, praise, and gratitude to open our space so we create a sacred space together. This is why we're doing it. So we'll just hold your heart in love, feel the love, and let go of the love, feel the love, and send it out. Praise, feel the praise, give praise, feel it in and let it go all the way through your body and out the crown of your head. And it just like ripples like water. You might hear that I have water in the background. That's very healing for the conscious and subconscious mind. And gratitude, and the calling the angel of gratitude. Gratitude is like conditioner for our hair. Gratitude is our connection to life and not being attached to whether something is challenging and difficult or something feels like easy and breezy. It's all a part of creation or someplace in between. Today, I wanted to talk about something that is kind of talking about it raw because it's not planned. I just wanted to share that with you. So what happened was I've been working to be more comfortable in my body. Like there are some people who are really comfortable in the physical plane and have that kind of connection. There are other people like me who are considered empaths, considered those who have a much etheric connection. We need both those connections. We need, especially here on earth, to create the kind of life we want, right? And to create the kind of living conditions in this world that we want with planet Earth. Is we have to be engaged. On just saying the short end, that back in the 80s, when I first started my journey in metaphysics, there were a lot of people, like I think some of the earliest people for me were Sylvia Brown. Who else? There was Edie, I forget what her name is, Saved by the Light, Daniel Brinkley. It was a whole kind of things being brought to life, and there was a lot of attention on life and death. And because it's natural for people to really wonder if there is life after death and what does it look like, and so people that have near-death experiences and come back, especially during the 80s when I was in high school, that was really coming something people focused on. There was a lot of media attention. And so it's something that I had access to books and information. And I can tell you this, that one of the things that I read about these individuals that had, again, near-death experiences, and these were things that caused trauma in their body, trauma in their life. I said, I want to know what that experience is like to reach beyond life, but I don't want to have a near-death experience. I don't want to have to put my body and my family through all of that. And so in my beautiful inner child mind, I was like, this is way that I would do that. And this is what I want to envision for my life. And I did, of course, didn't realize at that time how powerful that was. I wasn't raised in an environment that believed anything about thought being caused. I was raised in an environment where, which is pretty typical, people think that whatever I say is reality, meaning my parents might have been thinking certain things, but then when I would ask them a direct question about it, they wouldn't tell me the truth. They would tell me what they wanted me to know, or they changed the perception from reality to what they wanted me to believe what it was. And often it was not what the truth of it was. But I have to say, in the environment that I grew in, most of the time, it wasn't anything that was being, I wasn't being misdirected because harm was coming to me or I was being abused. It was misdirected because the adults weren't prepared to answer my questions. They maybe didn't even know exactly the answer themselves. And very often it was like they were just not emotionally ready to share information with me. And they were a little bit surprised that I was so empathic. And so I would ask questions of things that they didn't want me to know, and I'd come directly through the front door and ask that question. They'd be like, okay, no, I don't want her to know that. And so they would misdirect me. And so it was a little bit frustrating from my point of view, because they didn't realize that I was calibrating for truth. Like I was a kid. I was like, I trusted those early relationships, and those early relationships were calibrating for their own self-preservation and their own safety. They were not calibrating for truth. So I would say that as a parent, I parent differently. Of course, we all do. I mean, that's always the goal. But for me, I was like, I have to understand that I can say to my kids, and I have often when they were little, and now they're teenagers and adult, I can say to them, I'm not ready to talk about this yet. I'm not prepared to, or you're asking a question that I got to really think about this. I got to separate what's going on with me with the actual answer, and that's all. And what I figured out is that's all that anybody really needs. So that's one part of it, is the parenting part of it. And so self-parenting, it comes in when you realize, or when I realized that pattern was all throughout my childhood, and even today my experience with my own parents, is that it does continue. And it still surprises me, but I realize, okay, that's a pattern that they're going to continue their whole life. So I go back and I parent my inner child. And this is where I want to pick up this experience that happened over the weekend. I want to first say, but I got a health reading a couple of weeks ago. And the health reading was really amazing, because it had just really acknowledged that I had been doing a lot of dedication, a lot of releasing attachments, that my reading said that I'm a very disciplined person, which I am, but it's that I need to bring more joy, more flow, more creativity, because really growth is in creativity, right? It's in imagination. It's taking resources and taking love, and for me that's the earth and the animals, and it's growing planting seeds and growing plants and sharing good food and healthy remedies with people, and joy and creativity and spontaneity, and creating your own art, and those creating your own recipes, and creating your own sacred space to lift you and restore you and renew you. Also a place where you have a corner, a new place where you can cry, you can release, you can scream, you can let those things that are in the body out, so that you can understand them and set them free. And when you've reached the understandings of what they were holding space for you, then they leave, and it's a celebration and it's a filling up. But it's this constant ebb and flow, right? Life is always changing. Think of the ocean and the water. Where there is a void, it will be filled. Where there's a movement, there's a flow. You take out a bucket of water of the ocean, and the water fills in that space, right? So this happens within us. So when I'll break it down a little bit. When you have a memory, or you're talking to your own children, or someone else is talking to you about their children, then it gives us an opportunity to have something come up from our cosmic stew, something come up from our chakras, something come up from that childhood level of consciousness, which we call the inner child. And it comes up because it's ready to be dealt with. In this particular case, I didn't feel like I had anything to work with. And my health reading had said there is still a little bit of grief and a little bit of joy. And when that grief is allowed to be recognized and it is allowed to sing its song, these are my words, then it will be able to, I'll be able to experience this depth and joy that I haven't experienced before. So that's the value of having a reading, an intuitive reading, a health reading, like the ones I've had, because it brings something that's unconscious to my conscious awareness. And it might be hard to hear and it might be a little confusing, but at the end of the day, I know it's truth. And so I allow myself, I've been working with readings since I was in my early 20s. So it's been over 30 years. And so this is what happened. I don't know exactly what stimulated it, but I do know that I had this memory, and I was going to sleep at night, and I'd been using a new essential oil called Angel of the Night Watch. And when I went to bed that night, because my health reading had said, pay attention to thoughts and feelings, pictures that just kind of come up that feel uncomfortable, that are around my childhood. And that will give me the clue of the information. And it was interesting too, because I recall now that it also said that this information can come through in my dream time. I've been an avid dreamer. I learned how to interpret dreams. It motivated me to learn to be a metaphysical teacher and teach other people about their dreams in my life way before my kids. Something I would never have thought to do before, but I love doing it. Is I learned how to overcome my own anxiety and be on a number of markets of radio doing dream interpretation in Chicago, in Dallas, Texas, Kansas City, Kansas, just to name a few. I was also on TV in quite a bit in Kansas City when I lived there. I've written articles. I've been published in just local papers, community papers, things like that. And this goes back in the 1990s. But anyway, it got me into this place where I had a place to give. It was constantly pulling me out of my comfort zone, and I really learned to enjoy it. And I interpretation comes from knowing yourself. It comes from knowing myself. It comes from knowing my dreams. And then when you put yourself out in the public, and there's radio shows and drive time shows and nighttime shows and noontime TV broadcasts, and you get all kinds of people asking you questions, and they're not always really interested, and they're not always there to really see the validity of dreams. Sometimes they're there to poke fun, or there's the sarcasm. So you kind of learn that you have to, I did anyway, I kind of learned that I have to use my sense of humor, and that I knew there were people who were out there that really wanted the information. And so I had to try to just continue to move forward and to do it anyway, and not get stuck in the people who, were pulling on me or pulling on that information and not really interested in it, but they were interested in their, minute of fame, I guess you would say it is. But I was interested in service. I was interested in getting the word out there, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought, okay, my health reading said that this information could come in through my dreams, because for the first couple of weeks, I didn't have any clarity. Oh, there's my guinea pigs. They're in my room now. So those are my guinea pigs, and they hear me talking. And every time they hear me talking, they think they should be being fed. So, but I brought them into my area so that they can be more part of what I'm doing. So you might hear guinea pigs. That's a guinea pig. So I want to get to the heart. This is the heart of what I wanted to say, is that then I was going to bed at night. I was putting on my new Angel of the Night Watch oil, and I was really getting ready for dream time. The quality of my dream time has really changed since the winter solstice, and using the new alchemical oil, which calls on the Angel of the Night Watch to be with me. What I didn't realize is that the angel was going to have an inner dialogue with me before I went to sleep. So at the time, I didn't realize it was the angel that was speaking to me, but it was later that I felt into this, and I've consistently been using this oil since right around the winter solstice, as soon as I received it through the mail. But I'd been working with the sigils before this, I believe it was before the solstice, because I got the actual a picture, a sigil, a sacred code to look at in order to activate the connection with this angel. And then, of course, it deepens the connection with the oil. So this one night, I was going to bed, and all of a sudden, I remembered something that one of my parents had said to me, and I'm not going to give you the details. I don't want to trigger you. It could be any person, any parent. It could be a sibling. It could be a teacher. It could be something we see. Anything. It could be any kind of a trigger. So for this particular one, this was this one particular person in my life had said something to me, and that little snippet of conversation came up in my mind, and I'm like, why do I know that information? I'm a little girl. I shouldn't know that information. And this person had a need to share something with somebody. And since I was in the environment, in order to make their load lighter, they said it to me, which was something I had no understanding of. And I'll say that, it wasn't of sexual nature, and it wasn't harm. It wasn't anything like that, but it was something that was an adult conversation, not to be shared with a child. Like I knew that. But so what happened was the angel was showing me in that instance, something had happened. And this was a repeated pattern. And it was important for me to have a understanding of what that was, because it was speaks to the pattern that was still prevalent in my life. So this person who is an authority said something to me that I had no place to receive, but I remembered it really clearly what they said. And when I'm going through my dream time and I'm there present with my inner child, right? This is my childhood, and I'm there, but I'm there with me now. And I'm like, that's inappropriate. Why did that person tell me this? And I can see, yeah, that person was hurt. That person did this. That was completely inappropriate, but that is what they did. And then what happened on my end of it is that what happened was I wanted to be there for that person. Right. And I thought, since that person was like confiding in me, basically, I wanted, like a friend would confide in you, right? You want to listen to them, but you're a kid. And what do you do with your best friend? You put your arm around them. You're like, it's going to be okay. And, tell me about it. And you're there, and you're loving, and you're supportive. And, that's what I wanted to be for that person, although this person was an adult. And I realized that even now, there are times in which I get really bound up. I feel really conflicted when somebody in my environment, it's mostly in my personal life, not my professional life, because professionally I have a different perspective. But let's say it's personal, and I get really connected to this, and I feel inadequate to respond to them fully. Now, as an adult, I learned to say things. As an adult, I am genuine with what I can give. I give what I can, but I feel like there is something here, and I don't know what it is. But I didn't recognize that it went back to this, right? That's the nature of the unconscious becoming conscious. So then we can learn, absorb, and set it free. And this was a big one for me. And this is why I'm coming on today and sharing this with you, because what happened was I realized, because I was not able to make that adult feel better, that I felt inadequate. And so it didn't matter who the person was, again, other than my clients, because I do get myself in a different headspace, a more neutral headspace when I'm obviously with clients. And I realized that that's what it is, that that person put me in that position to be, I could only fail in my own eyes. I could not offer them the support that I wanted to, because it was not mine to, I was not for me to be in that place. And so the angel and I worked on this for a few hours before I ever went to sleep. And I kept asking, like, I would ask a question. I'd be like, you know what? I have these techniques. I have this one technique, Hopo'ono for forgiveness, right? I do that quite a bit. And I do that for ancestral clearing. I have the In Harmony list, and I'll make videos about these, the In Harmony list. There's also Byron Katie, the Love Thy Neighbor worksheet and the turnarounds. Okay, that's all about learning, identifying ourself through other people or through these experiences. And most importantly, having the open-heartedness and having the honesty and self-honesty and integrity to deal with it, to resolve it, to dissolve it, accept it, bring it forward and move on, so that it's not something that we have to come back and re-experience as a pattern or an unsung song of self, or if you look at it as a piece of karma that has to be resolved. So at the end of it all, I was able to resolve it in a very short, with a very short method, because this situation also helped me to come to terms with something I was not able to finish last year, which is one of the techniques that I use for resolving things like this when they come up. But it's like an 8 or 10 step process. And I keep feeling like my inner being wants me to do it and offer it as alongside these other things. And I didn't. And I felt a little bad about it, but I didn't really feel guilt or remorse, because I kept saying, I know myself, and when I'm ready, I will do it. I don't know why I'm not ready yet. And so then when this angel of the night came up and we were working on this together, I realized, she's like, well, how am I going to do this? I'm like, well, I have that really long technique. And I'm like, but I'm not using it. And because I need to use it in order to be able to connect with it. This is how I work anyway with my work. Then only then after I receive benefit and I know how that is beneficial for others, then I offer it as a service, something that I teach or something that I incorporate into my volunteer work, something like that. And I hadn't really gotten at that point. I'm like, it's too complicated. People aren't going to do it. People need to resolve things. They need to feel that resolve coming in a little more closely. They need to have cause and effect, in other words, has to be a little closer. I'm making this perception change, this pain or this mental anguish is lessening. Okay, those two things go together. Okay, so often there's not this direction, cause and effect that can be directly experienced in the physical plane. And that's really what we need right now, because we need to do a lot of resolution so that we can get on with our evolution, right? So I was like, okay, I was feeling a little better about that. So then I was like, well, I can use this process, but I don't want to do something that's from my ego, because that's something else that has come up recently too. And in a couple of my groups is my spiritual comrades, is that the question of something being universal or something being beneficial versus us just recreating things over and over, where people get caught in learning protocols and not really learning, how to really live and how to really enjoy their lives. And I've had both teachings. I've had the old school teachings where you do things over and over and over again. We did things for prayers for peace for, an hour, a prayer for peace every day for decades. Once you start a prayer, it's like you basically are never supposed to stop it until that situation is resolved, right? And I had other teachers more recently that were like, okay, now we need to be able to move with the quickness of the of time. We need to go past linear time duality, and we can actually connect with the movement of like a sonic boom. And if we align ourselves, because that is the nature of the universe, it's only us choosing this other pathway, this other duality, this other linear way of growth and movement away from this other, aligning ourselves with even what we might even call beyond movement, right? And so I'm very fortunate to have worked with a number of these teachers, and many of them have left the building. They have gone into higher levels, and but there are those of us that they worked with and gave that information and continue to help bring that information forward. But it's been a kind of a challenge because there's still a huge focus on you have to do it the way a certain person says because they know how to do it. But it's been a really big time in coming that people learn how to move out of spiritual childhood, which that's spiritual childhood. I mean, the children in my home, I no longer say things like that to them. So then the next thing is that I have to focus on realizing that I am no longer the person giving them the answers, that I have to be the person who listens to them and says, I know you can do it. And even though they might try to persuade me that it's up to me to do certain things, I have to learn how to hold my ground. I have to learn how to hold my spiritual calling and allow the space so that they can step into it, so they can air their frustrations. Okay. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, where there was an adult who did this other kind of thing, which I didn't realize until very recently that I still carried that pattern around. And because I couldn't support this one person, I held myself back. And so now I was ready to really address this. And I'm sure there's more to it. This is just the beginning of it. Okay. So this is what I wanted to share with you. What happened was I felt much better about it. I realized that what I just said is that I did what I could do, and that felt good. And it was an unequal relationship. And then this person was just using me to make themselves feel better. And that this person wasn't open to self-reflection. They weren't open to saying, that, okay, I did what I did in the past, what I did, but I'm moving forward. I'm going to realize that I know better so I could do better, something that people say. So anyway, it really, really did help me immensely. And of course, as soon as you learn something like that, you have an awakening, then the environment changes. And I've had a number of opportunities where honestly, everyone else who has been around me, not supporting me, because now I have this new perspective. And I'm like, I know they need their time and their space to do the things they do, but I can no longer act like I don't know something. And that if they choose not to learn something different or at least experiment with my idea, then I have to let them go. I have to let that situation go. I have to let that job go or that role go or that responsibility go. And it can be really challenging. It can be really unexpected. So I do feel good about that because I've been and I had just an experience last night, and I spoke up, and someone told me, well, you're too loud. And I'm like, there is a lot of energy with what I'm saying. And I get that. But what I have to say right now, it feels really important at least to say it, and then we can come back and discuss it. But it was really important for me to say, I know something. This is not the way that I would do it. And this is something that I even spoke to somebody and said, look, there's situations recently this last year, which I never thought that I would take this look at it. There are things that, and nothing, you know, it was always within my own morality, and it was always encouraged by my inner strength. But when you have partners and you have business partners, and like, I was willing to go along with things that they wanted to do because I wanted them to create it. And they weren't willing to give me that same kind of grace, or they weren't willing to, couldn't be as spontaneous and creative, and ultimately couldn't relinquish the control, right? Is what it comes to, is that it was okay for me to let go and to stretch myself and to see, and, you know, things worked out in a certain way. And it was something we both felt we could get behind. But when I was asked for the same kind of support, it wasn't given. And a lot of things came out of that. And it was challenging, right? It was really challenging. But I felt really good because I had a lot of like resilience within. I had just had this information from my reading, and it was like, don't even be attached to the fact that you're not being supported. Don't be attached to that. Just let that go, because what I need to do, no matter who it is, I need to be able to be independent. I need to be able to be creative. And this is what we all are being called to do, because the answer that I had was based upon, my training and my creativity. And this was a light in which individuals hadn't really seen me. And so I had to really feel myself. And I'll tell you what it comes to is, it comes up again, is inner authority, right? How many times as an empath, and this has been like my experience, but it evolves, and maybe it's been yours, which is, I had people tell me, oh, you can't act like you have too much authority because people won't like that. Like, these are women that tell me that. These are women, these are people who are in my field, and they actually have, you know, they have really are making a way in the world. They have a lot of connections, really good people, but they have said things to me like that. I thought, why would you say that to somebody? Because it wasn't coming from ego. I have to check my ego, and I'm like, I'm willing to receive that feedback and say, is this true or is this not true? You know, and I'm willing to at least receive that feedback. But I've worked really diligently with aligning myself with creation and moving forward, and not being ego means a lot of things to different people, but ego driven. I clearly do not have to receive credit for what it is that I do. That basically, that's the bottom line. That it's a life of service, and it's a life of support, for sure. I've had to learn how to really support myself and support my body and support myself financially, which is another really important thing right now, to have self-sovereignty, right? And to have that personal network within being deeply rooted. So let me see if there's, I know I would kind of like went a couple different ways with this, but let me see if I said I said mostly what I wanted to say. That I wanted to just kind of summarize and say that when this conversation came up with the Angel of the Night Watch, I really didn't realize how profound that experience was. So it was maybe one of the first times that I realized that somebody was asking me to support them and I couldn't, basically dumping on me, emotional dump, which was a repeated pattern throughout my whole childhood and up again until pretty much my mid-20s, when I started studying metaphysics and listening to my dreams and meditation, and having a place to give and receive, and then teaching, and then directing a spiritual center, right? And that's something that I've continued throughout my life, to be a part of communities, to be a part of a volunteer, to be a part of a community leader, to be a part of helping support mostly other people's visions, right? And so now I have to, raising my kids, it's my vision really isn't an ego vision. It's a vision about healing with the earth. It's about healing our body, mind, spirit. It's about creating beautiful, sacred, creative space for ourselves, for our family, something that fills the needs for everybody and diversity. Like, this is my place to begin to create this, right? And move this forward. So that's why having the health reading, so that I can really move forward with grace and with more ease. And when grit is required, I have it. Where there is resilience, that if I resist something, I have an awareness, and that I have my tools to support myself through that. Healing my inner child in this way, reparenting myself in this way by saying that's not right. It wasn't good for them to do that. It did happen. What are you doing with it? How did I parent my kids? How am I parenting myself? How am I looking at myself? Because that's the most important thing, is being here in the moment means being fully present, parenting myself the way that I need to be parented, which has absolutely really nothing to do with the way in which my parents parented me, or the karmic or dharmic mixture of situation that I came into, for whatever reason I came into that. So there's more that we can talk on the karma dharma subjects. We can certainly talk more about people like myself and others who are now realizing that our living agreement wasn't because this was the best our karma could buy, so to speak. I hope you know what I mean when I say that. Put any questions below. I'd be happy to answer them. So um, I know that we can connect more deeply and more clearly on this. But what that means is that when I learned about karma, it was like, well, if you look at people in India, and I love you, India, and I totally don't see it this way anymore, but there's a very distinct caste system, and there's the untouchables, and then there's the Brahmins, and everywhere in between. And you're born into that caste, and the teaching is that that was the highest birth that you could have, that if you had better karma, then you would have been able to reach a higher birth and been in a different family, or been in a Brahmin family. Okay. And so this is how I was taught it. And when that happened, I was about 25 when I learned this in my studies of metaphysics, but really in 19 okay, right around, this is around early 2000s. It was in my second group of teachings outside of metaphysics, but it was more in the shamanic practice. But my shamanic teacher was diverse, and had learned from many teachers as a child. Their parents had sent them to other groups, Buddhism and Hinduism, and other earth keepers that were beyond their own native lodges and things. So there was a lot of eclectic information that was received. So the Dharma and karma wasn't so much shamanic, but it does tie into, you know what I mean? It ties into what they learned through another culture, and they were able to teach both schools of study. There were like 3 schools of study that they taught. So, but anyway, so then what happened is, years and years and years later, there was an epiphany that happened. And it's something I had a hard time believing, again, because this is ego. Like, is this ego gratification? And when I first learned about karma, I made a vow that I would never repeat whatever I had done that made it so that the family I was born into was my highest birth possible. And I cried. I mean, I cried. I'm like, what horrible person was I? What did I do? I promise I will never do that. I will do hours and hours of meditation, and I will do all the things I can do. And I know it gets a little crazy, because then the ego gets involved. Then the ego gets involved, and you're bad and you're a horrible person. And that's why you have to kind of like disconnect from that and say, no, it's really not what it means, because look at the choices I've made. What have I done in my life? Who am I? I had a lot of personal integrity, even though at a very, very, very early age, even though my environment was not full of integrity. It was full of lies. It was full of deceit. It was full of harm. It was full of secrets. And I'm like, why would I have done that? If I couldn't get a higher birth, I would choose this, but if I could get a higher birth, why would I choose this? But then after 2020 and 2012, right around 2012, and then people started to realize that there were people who came in, like myself and others, who incarned into situations not because it was the only place they could be, because it was a healing place to be. That it was, I could bring to the table what I had, and it would be a different experience than living in like a monastery or living in a certain kind of a community, that it really was going to be a grassroots effort. And it took probably another 10 years for me to accept that. Like 10 years from the time that I saw other people and I heard other people's readings, who I know they shared that they had a lot of physical turmoil and experiences and hardships like I did. And then their readings about their Dharma said, you went there to be the light. You went there because that family needed healing. You didn't go there because it was the only thing you could do. Just your presence in their life brought wholeness and healing. And I was floored. It was this one time that people were sharing what their Dharma was. They were sharing a little bit about their childhood and what they learned. And I was fascinated and I was floored over all the people over and over and over again that could not, that had similar experiences and their readings too. And we were all together in a group. So the law of attraction says you have to look at this. And even my own reading was showing me of all the things that I had done in my life, how I've done in my own experiences, and that it showed me that I came to bring light to the situation, that I incarned in the situation, in the place, in order to give, not to have retribution or not to make up for something. And I was floored. And it's not something that I've shared with anybody. There are many people like me, like I said. So then there was a whole nother group of people who they had a mentor, they had a teacher who told them that. Like their mentor, their teacher started in the 90s and said, look, you came here on I want to say special assignment. It doesn't make you like ego special, but you have a different purpose than the other people that are around. Okay. You are an enlightened being in a way. You are an ancient one. You hold keys and you're going to be asleep. Some people are still born asleep. Some people are born awake. People I know who were born awake, they didn't have that veil. Others have the partial veil. Okay. Others have to work on it. It's all in agreement. But anyway, so then in the last 10 years, there is a whole group of people who their teachers said are like, I see you. And so their perspective was different. They accepted that. They saw that teacher's authority. And because of that, they were able to move through that very quickly and really start giving from the light, the awareness of who they are, what they were doing. There was a whole group. There was being mentored. They were really doing amazing things in the world, in the etheric plane, and affecting the physical plane, mostly is what was going on. And when I kind of met up with this group, and I could go into that story, but let's just say the short part of it is one day that I realized that I was a part of this group. There was a lot of conversations in the group where the teacher had not gone out and collected her students, but people found their way there, right? And people were saying, well, how do I know that I fit into this soul group? And the basic teaching was, it doesn't matter if you are or not. Like, that's not really the point. The point is, are you willing to do the things that the mentor was asking? Are you willing to live these teachings? And the teachings are about spiritual maturity. And the teachings are about connecting and growing and learning how to be accountable. And even within that group, I, of course, was not given a welcome. Of course, I was told by a number of people who were a part of that you're not a part of that. And I had to really sit with it, because a part of my own learning was that I had to validate myself, that I could not have someone validate outside of me to really know that it was real. And that actually there was something about their own learning that they saw in me, which wasn't really about me, it was about them. Um, and I was finally in a spot where I could be comfortable with understanding that people may have a perception of me which was not accurate, but it was accurate for them because they needed to bump up against it. And the more that I could just be me and use this and really use that experience to grow and be in humility, I found a great deal of satisfaction, a great deal of buoyancy and inner support. It was only after I had accepted that I am I do fit into this group, that I do fit into what it is I'm doing, and that I'm also a little different too. And that I'm not it's not a cookie cutter. It's not a cookie cutter approach. And this, when I read listened to the teachings of the mentor, and that is like I saw something different than maybe what others were seeing. And I thought, well, that's why I'm here. I'm not here to get the traditional teaching of it. I'm here to see with fresh eyes. I'm here to see with the eyes of the innocence. And that is what I saw. I saw the mentor really urging people to, yes, what I call is calibrate yourself, align yourself, work with your chakras and your nervous system, work with your mental, emotional, physical level, work with all your dimensions together, be led from within, and ask your questions. And she gave some really good tools and things to use in the world. And that's it. I'm not responsible for telling people what they should or shouldn't do, not responsible for judging or criticizing, that I am responsible for growing my own garden. This is my metaphor. I'm responsible for, I love to grow with the earth angels. I want everybody to benefit from what I do. I want to encourage other people to do this and more. That's what I want the message to be, that the light isn't just in me, it's in everyone. And that my song is a unique fractal, and it's different and unique, and it's important. And every other person on earth, their fractal is different and important and unique, and that they need to find their way in order to grow from within and have that stability, so that we can all be those beautiful flowers, those diverse flowers in the garden, the diverse trees in the world, diverse produce. That is our unique gift, is what we have from within, and then we get to share that with each other. Because what my other friends do, and in my soul group too, it's like, I love they do that. That may not be something that I would ever do. But I benefit from them doing it. They benefit from me doing it. And we all kind of come together and we share in that energy outside, space and time, right? Again, what we've been taught to do, to go beyond duality. But you have to master a life within duality, which was not what they were showing me in the 80s, but it is something that we know we need to do for our next step. If you're listening to this, there's probably some part of this that you're questioning, some part of this that feels right, some part of it that is rooted. And I hope that it also, I know it's going to stretch you. I know that there's going to be some things that I say that are not going to be in alignment with the way that you're thinking currently, but that is how life works. So I just want to share that with you. I think that's the end of my ocean video. So that's probably the end here. Let me just think before I close out our session. There was anything I wanted to really say here. That taking care of your inner child and parenting your inner child with love, with truth, with faith, that means you have to have it requires of us a place to learn how to deal with adversity, how to deal with our own inner conflicting ideas, conflicts with others. We have to have resolution. Okay, we can't just like have peace comes from within, and I can only give the peace that I have. That's another way of saying that. So Anyway, I think that was pretty much it. The Angel of the Night Watch, the fragrance, I can post, and you can look at my blog post on my website, www.loreleibrogan.com. This is just a raw and real. I know what else I wanted to say. So the last thing I'll end with is this picture. So after I had this talk with the angel and I had this resolution, and of course, the next few days I've had to wake up and in my life in real time stand up and speak and for myself, and whether or not my environment was um, open to it. I'm in a new environment, I'm in a new place. It's important for me to do. So then what happened was so interesting. So this is about the brain and how the brain works, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of the way that I understand it, but there's a lot of information, a lot of people that have written about this. So your brain is really efficient. And for one thing is, so if you meet someone for the first time, basically your brain takes a picture of them and says, new person, new picture, new file. You see that person again, they're like, oh, I have a picture of that person. I'm going to match it up. I don't need to take that picture over again. So basically, your brain wants to be really efficient. It takes the line of least resistance. And so every time somebody sees you or somebody hears you, the more information they have about you, they that is a set pattern. So you might change your, let's just say physically, you might cut your hair, you might change your hair color, you might change your makeup, you might do something different with your appearance. You may notice, gosh, people don't comment on things are different. It's because a lot of people aren't noticing because their brain is just working on efficiency. And there may be a time in which they say, oh, you look different, but it was like months ago you changed it. Okay. Well, your brain works the same way when it's processing. And it's important for the brain to work in process, right? Things. They think about the inner child. We have a kitten in the house, and it's really fun to watch him learn how he's growing and his senses are growing, and he's a cat, so he's like curious, and he's sensitive to sounds and shapes and smells and this and that and the other. It's very fascinating to watch because you realize that's how we all came into this world. And so the brain has to take in tons and tons and tons and tons of information in order to be able to what function in the body, to feel safe, to feed yourself, to move, to explore, and all that. So the brain continues to work like that. But as an adult, we have so much information that it does require a lot for it to change. But I had this epiphany because I've been willing to pull things up and look at them in more detail. And my brain something happened, and there was like a little bit of information that my partner had shared with me. But I was like, well, am I supposed to know this information? Is this new information? I was a little bit confused, but I could see that I saw this visual picture of my brain taking like a piece of a puzzle and creating a whole scenario out of it. And I realized pretty quickly that that scenario wasn't even based on any kind of incoming information. It was just filling in around a little piece of information in order to create a full picture. And it wasn't even accurate. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing because my brain is making these decisions and feeding me this information all the time." And I was just laughing about it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is not even true." And I was like sitting there talking to my brain like, "Wow, let's not do that. Like if there's a decision to make, let me make that decision." Um, but how was it helpful? Was helpful because in one way I was having a deeper, and it almost feels like a slow motion impact of how these things are affecting me and in my life. And this is exactly what my health reading was talking about, is that I had a level of being able to realize how this was working in my life. But because I was that one block I had, I'm sure there's a couple, like I said, I'm sure there's a couple others, but just by removing that block, by understanding it, it helped me receive more direct information from my environment. Hence, it helped me very rapidly and very quickly now be able to go through information that's within me and around me and look for things that are actually based in truth or things that are just based upon filler, so that life can be really efficient even if you know some information is just filler information. That's good to know because you'll just move on. Like, okay, I don't have to be concerned that there's something in there for me, a puzzle piece. And if I don't get in there and really address it, that I'll be missing a piece and I'll have to come back. I hope that makes sense. I know I was talking off the cuff, and sometimes we can cover a lot of information when you get into that same space, right? And you get off the cuff information. So I'm going to end now. We're going to close this off with we close it with the angels, and now we're going to go counterclockwise, and we start by doing praise, angel praise. Thank you. Angel of love, angel of gratitude. So now we're closing the sacred space that it's here for us. And now the other thing that I want to do is I will do a light explosion, which is an amazing tool for creating our own sacred space within our own being and also within our bank accounts, within our cars, within our businesses, within our connection with our loved ones, with our connection with the earth, the water, the fire, the air, ether, our inner guidance. Our I am presence, the totality of life. So I'm going to start and just taking a deep breath. And I'll just go through this for you. So basically, just feel yourself like a beautiful, like a waterfall or a spray, or you might see it as a light shower. You might see it as like taking a shower in the morning and see this rainbow light come through, but it's not in the normal rainbow. Okay, so I'll just start. So red, magenta, amethyst, golden yellow, turquoise, emerald green, sky blue, ultraviolet, amber, apple green, aquamarine, peach, deep teal, pearlescent white light. I'm going to do one more. Red, magenta, amethyst, golden yellow, turquoise, emerald green, sky blue, ultraviolet, amber, apple green, aquamarine, peach, deep teal, pearlescent white light. And you might just sit in the silence and silence your mind. Let your mind drop into your heart. Feel the resonance of your heart. Your heart is like a computer. We need it to function with our body, but we also need it to surrender to our heart, our frequency, our chakra system, moving from 7 chakras to 12 chakras to 24 chakras into the field of oneness, of infinity. Thank you.